Thank you very much for joining us. Columbian is pleased to welcome candidates for Port of Vancouver Commissioner Position 2. I'm Greg Jane, the editorial page editor. I will let the board members introduce themselves. Craig.
Hi, I'm Craig Brown. I'm the editor of the Columbian.
And Scott and Jody.
Scott and Jody.
Scott and Jody.
Yeah.
And then Ben.
Ben Campbell, publisher of the Columbian. Thank you, Greg and Eric, for being here today.
Yes, thank you for joining us. Those are the editorial board members. Also should mention Will Campbell, a reporter, is sitting in on this meeting. He will not be asking questions in this forum, but may want to speak with you later. And finally, as mentioned previously, we are recording this and we will post it unedited on our website. Let's see. So now we'll move to the important part. For the candidates, if you could please just take 1 to 2 minutes, introduce yourselves, explain why you are running for this position, and after that we'll move on to specific topics of interest. And we'll start with Eric.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Eric LaBrant. I'm currently serving on the Port of Vancouver Board of Commissioners. I grew up in this area and graduated from Port Vancouver High School. I bought a home in Fruit Valley in 2009 because as a single parent, that's what I could afford. And I found Fruit Valley to be a welcoming and wonderful place to raise my kids. One is a senior at iTech here in Vancouver and one who's over at WSU Pullman. Go Cougs. I joined the Fruit Valley Neighborhood Association in 2010 and was elected chairperson in 2011. And that was actually my first introduction to the Port of Vancouver as a member of the Vancouver Lake Watershed Partnership. My background is in accounting and finance, and I've worked in several sectors, including international freight, more recently in software. I also volunteer as a mentor for the WSU Vancouver Business Growth Mentoring and Analysis Program, which I've been doing for over 5 years now. That's a program that pairs student teams with local small businesses to help them find ways to grow. I've been serving on the Port of Vancouver Board of Commissioners since 2016. Certainly a lot has changed in that time, but I still live in Fruit Valley. I still live on the edge of Port property and walking distance from Vancouver Lake. And so I want to make sure that the port's growth continues to be safe and sustainable, and that we continue to be good neighbors to the rest of Vancouver.
Great, thank you. And Greg?
So good day. My name is Greg Seifert, and I'm a longtime resident of the area. Know some of you, not all of you. Went to Columbia River as opposed to Fort. Good rivals there. Have been here since I went away for college and came back. Raised our 5 kids here, my wife Karen and I. I live in the Salmon Creek area and have lived in that area for some time now. Why am I running? I see what I call a leadership vacuum on the Port commissioner side, and it has to do with, I think, maybe inexperience on the part of current board commissioners in regards to their how boards run and what they should do and how they should work with the leadership of the Port. And so I'm looking to provide some leadership that I see lacking there. And so that's the main reason I'm running. I have some other things. Vancouver Lake is an issue that I think needs to be addressed more strongly. So I'm running because of that. And I would like to see a more proactive board of commissioners, and I just see that being a lack of experience, not necessarily a lack of intent or a lack of desire. And so my background, what qualifies me, I've been in business for some time. Was the president of Biggs Insurance, as some of you know, for about 10 years. That's an agency in downtown with over 50 employees. I've been on numerous boards over the years, Rotary Club boards, Southwest Washington Hospital Foundation board, and I've been involved in the community in many ways. Coached soccer for over 10 years, had a team called the Rockin' Robins, and still have relationships with some of those girls today as kind of a father figure in their lives, and occasionally see even some of their children. So that's who I am and why I'm running.
Great. Well, thank you again. Thanks to both of you. Let's start out with, let's talk about Terminal 1 on the waterfront, which is owned by the port. What do you foresee for that development? Which direction would you pursue? We'll start with Greg.
So I think Terminal 1 is a piece of one of the most exciting things that I've seen in Vancouver for a long time. I think the waterfront development in general, and then the port piece that kind of surrounds the one that's going on there right now that's not the port project. I've watched downtown Vancouver die. I watched it get resurrected through some leadership of our mayor and some other leaders at the time. I think the year-round market they're talking about, the hotel that Rick DeKetch is putting in, it's an amazing development, and so I would like to see. I'd like to see it happen sooner. I know that it's scheduled currently. It's on the list of things they're doing, and I expect that it will happen. I was in the hotel the other day, kind of taking a look at that and getting an idea of what's going on, and I'm watching the waterfront, work that the port's doing. So, from my standpoint, it's very exciting, and I can hardly wait for it to be finished.
What would you do differently as opposed to the current plans?
I don't know that there's anything I would do differently. I mean, I'd like to see it maybe happen more quickly. That's the one thing I've noticed is that, they've been talking about this market for some time. I don't know that that's realistic. In my conversations with Juliana, the CEO, and I know, they've got things in a kind of a priority list at the port. So only maybe timing. I'd love to see it happen more quickly, but I think everybody would like to see that thing get, as it's coming online, it's pretty exciting. And so, the sooner the better. But I like the year-round market. I like the multi-use building that they're talking about behind, the commercial and residential and retail space. I like the trail, the things that are going through there. And so there really isn't anything that I have any objections to or that I would change at this point.
Eric, how do you think that development is proceeding?
Going well. I'm actually down at Terminal 1 right now. So in the background, I'm looking at the construction of Vancouver Landing that is going. I'm also looking at the hotel that is being built literally before my very eyes right now. It's just a lot of fun down here. Schedule-wise, I think we're proceeding on pace. There is a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of the dock in particular, and I think that's kind of part of the timing element. And then there's also the funding. We want to make sure that we're taking advantage of grant opportunities that are available and making good use of public resources.
If it were solely up to you, what would you do differently?
Well, one of the things that I'm kind of excited about with that public market, if you come down to the waterfront right now, it's gorgeous, but at $40 a plate, I'm a single parent. I'm now at a place where I can afford something like that, but it's not necessarily the first place I'd bring a toddler. So my hope is actually that we can incorporate sort of an international focus to that public market. Right now, if you cruise down 4th Plain, Vancouver has a lot to offer from literally all around the world. And I think that that's something that could both make it a little more family friendly and also, maybe a little more affordable. Also think it'd be a tremendous draw from a tourism standpoint. That's really part of what we want to do is really put Vancouver on the map in a positive way.
Do you have any concerns? Yeah, go ahead.
I just really quick. So I was on originally on some of the original preliminary brainstorming sessions when the whole port was deciding what to do with that property. And one of the things that was mentioned by, I think it was Jordan with the farmers market, is that a lot of times these things don't pencil out, the open market, the public market. So can both of you maybe address that?
I guess
we'll start with Greg.
So, Jody, I can tell you that I haven't seen any numbers necessarily in regards to what the numbers pencil out at. From what I've seen about what's going to be in the market, it's a fairly significant mix of retail and other kinds of shops. And so I'd have to take a closer look. So I really don't know for sure, but it's not a one-use thing. And I'm hoping that as part of that planning that, they're looking at that piece because it's going to need to pencil long-term anyway, maybe not in the short term.
Yeah.
Eric, does it appear to pencil out?
I don't know that we've projected that far ahead in terms of specific, like rent rates and that kind of thing. But that's one of the purposes of the port, is to make sure that whatever we're doing, even if it's not going to make a ton of money, is really acting as a catalyst for the rest of downtown.
And do you have any concerns about if a new I-5 bridge gets built, would that be disruptive to Terminal 1, or would the footprint fit along Terminal 1? Greg, have you looked into that?
I have not looked into that specifically. I do have some history with disruption when they were looking at the CRC, because at the time I was in leadership at Biggs, and it was a fairly significant disruption depending on what they did with light rail. And so I would say, yes, it's a concern of mine. I know that the CEO of the port is on the committees and part of the process when they're looking at that. So I expect that the interests of the port are being well represented, but I haven't seen anything specific about what the impact would be, because I'm not sure they're that far along in the process of, from a design standpoint.
Eric?
So there are only so many places that the bridge can go, and we have a pretty decent idea of what the alignment is going to be on that. In part because a lot of permitting work was done around that alignment with the CRC originally, and so we have a pretty good idea of where it's going to go, and that is currently incorporated into the plans for not only the marketplace, but also those 4 blocks that we own.
Okay. Craig?
Sure. So both of you in your opening statements mentioned Vancouver Lake. So I'm interested to hear what role you think the port should play in cleaning up and restoring Vancouver Lake. Start with Eric, I guess.
All right. Well, Vancouver Lake is something I've been working on for years now, and obviously not alone. Vancouver Lake is something that hundreds of volunteers and professionals have put literally tens of thousands of hours toward. And I am proud to have been a part of that since 2011. The port's leadership role has been in spearheading those lake efforts all the way back to the 80s, and in some cases even before that. It's an ongoing and significant challenge. Actually, my first introduction to the port was through involvement with the Vancouver Lake Watershed Partnership through the Fruit Valley Neighborhood Association. It's a complex ecosystem. The technical foundation, which is kind of the introduction to what's going on at the lake, just that introduction is 64 pages long. So there's a lot happening. Growth in Vancouver, growth in Ridgefield have contaminated the lake. Building dams on the Columbia has hurt the lake's water quality tremendously in terms of the amount of water going into the lake. Multiple invasive species that have severely damaged the ecosystem. And then now we have climate change, which is warming everything up, and that speeds up the growth of algae. So any plan that is going to make any real progress is literally going to have to address all of those in order to restore the lake. That said, I think there are some specific things that we can do. We can establish an interlocal agreement with other regional and state agencies. Like I said, it's a big issue, and we're going to need to bring a lot of folks to the table. And in the more immediate future, I think the port in particular can hire a hydrology consultant to look at ways to increase the throughput on the flushing channel to make sure more water is going in. And then we also could potentially build floating wetlands. That would be a way to quickly reduce the nutrients in the water column and to a slight degree lower the water temperature. We have a strong working relationship with the Department of Ecology. So I'm actually pretty confident that that's something that we can bring partners together to do and get permitted.
Now, when you talk about establish local agreements with other governments, why has that not been done yet?
That was done previously with the Vancouver Lake Watershed Partnership. It's not active currently, but we were able to, and the port actually at that time was able to pull together the county, the city, There's a whole mess of private landowners along, along the shoreline. Department of Natural Resources, Department of Ecology, Fish and Wildlife. What ultimately kind of did that effort in was the recession. And what the port did at that time with the money that it was contributing to that was to shift that over to the Lower Columbia Estuary Partnership, because one of the kind of other issues that we identified facing Vancouver Lake is just a lack of awareness in terms of in some cases, even the fact that it's there. So the Estuary Partnership is able to take groups of sometimes students, on a canoe with elected officials, just really to get introduced to the lake and what's going on for folks who maybe weren't aware previously.
Okay, Greg, your thoughts on Vancouver Lake? Oh, I'm sorry.
Agree.
Yeah.
Greg,
Go ahead.
yeah.
So do you want me to respond, or
Greg.
do you have a question?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, and then Scott will ask his question.
Oh, okay. Greg, go ahead.
Okay. So obviously Eric's very knowledgeable about the lake. I can tell you that one of the first groups that reached out to me when I filed was the Friends of Vancouver Lake. And the reason they reached out to me was because they are severely disappointed in the lack of anything that's been done actively by the current commissioners, including Eric. So I can't claim to have even close to the knowledge that he has, but I do know the lake is failing. I do know the flushing channel is not working as it should. Could be a maintenance issue, could be a design issue. There are people on both sides of that. I have committed to seeing what I can do, whether it's an interlocal or whether it's another entity like a lake management district or something like that, to bring the 6 public entities that I've identified that have a piece of the lake, none of which have responsibility or the finances to do something. Friends of Vancouver Lake currently has a hydrology study that they're paying for. I think they're going to seek some money from the county. There's about $150,000 sitting there that the legislature authorized. They're going to try and get some of that to pay for the balance of that study. Trying to get an idea of, what the real issue is at the lake. They've done some eradication of milfoil, and there's another curly weed or something that's there now. That's kind of like dressing. That's not really addressing the issue. And there's also issues on the Lake River side, and I know the Port of Richfield's involved there. So what I would say is it is a complex issue. It involves numerous state agencies and local agencies, and including the feds, Corps of Engineers. There's a process that would be necessary, and it would take some time. But I've committed to anybody who's asked that I will be in the middle of that, and will do what I could do as a port commissioner to move that forward, which is something that hasn't happened in the last 6 years.
So, excuse me. If that hasn't happened, why do you think that hasn't happened, and what would you do differently? What makes you think you can make it happen?
I can't guarantee I can make it happen because, as was stated, it is a complex issue and involves several different agencies. But what I've discovered is there's a lot of resources and interested people in the community that have been working on this. Like I said, the Friends of Vancouver Lake have some very knowledgeable individuals that are working on this issue. What I see is that not one individual has taken this on and said, okay, I'm going to make it a priority for me to pull this together and do what I can. So I think it's just a lack of somebody identifying that and needing to push forward. Doesn't mean I'll succeed, doesn't mean, because it involves governmental agencies at different levels, and that's a complex thing. So I can't guarantee success. I can just guarantee that I'll give it a shot and use the resources that I have and the connections that I have and the relationships I have in the community that I've already committed to those individuals, that I will work on that. I wish I could guarantee success, but obviously I cannot.
Sure. If you think you say you would be the person to lead this effort, so should the port in general take the lead more so than the city or the county or Ridgefield or the DNR?
I don't think any particular agency is going to probably end up taking the lead. so I think that my standing as a sitting port commissioner would give me some ability to do things that I can't do as a resident of the county. The port owns the Flushing Channel property. The port is responsible for the maintenance of the Flushing Channel. There's a difference of opinion regarding whether it's being maintained well or whether it's a design issue. One of the first things I would do would get to the bottom of that, at least from a port perspective. And Friends of Vancouver Lake does have some solutions they proposed. And I think the hydrology study is partly being done as a response to questions that the port commissioners did ask at one point. So it's not the port's responsibility, but it's not the county's responsibility, or DNR, or ecology, or the city, or the Corps of Engineers. They all have responsibilities, but it's not on anybody's agenda. So I think that somebody needs to work at that. You know, I'm experienced in working with the legislature. I've been there numerous times. I know the public officials, and so I think I'm as qualified as anybody to take it on as a project, but it's not because I think the port is primary. I think the port is part of it, and the fact that the Flushing Channel is a key to, I think, the solution, either in the current form that it is in now or some modification. The port has to be involved at some level.
Okay, thank you. Scott, you had a question?
Yeah, so gentlemen, I wonder if the two of you have been in a public venue together where you were explaining what your priorities and what you do as a port commissioner. Has that happened yet before this?
The only opportunity I've had has been the League of Women Voters interview a week or so ago. That's the only time that I've been side by side with Eric.
Okay, good, Eric. Okay, so
yeah.
so based on that exposure, can you delineate any differences between the two of you in terms of what your priorities would be? We've talked about the Flushing Channel, and I think everybody agrees that's a good thing to be working on and gets fixed. But is there anything else that pops up in terms of the direction you'd take the port over the next few years? Eric, you want to start first?
Yeah, I mean, floating wetlands are one of the options that was looked at during the lake partnership. Unfortunately, the recession hit, and so the lake partnership literally ran out of money, and really wasn't scaled up to be able to actually implement floating wetlands. I think that's something that we may be able to seek grants for. I think the other thing that we can do in terms of an interlocal agreement or coalition of some kind, the port is great as a convener of things, and you know that's something that the team is really good at, that the commission is always happy to participate in, and that's actually what happened with the previous lake partnership. Was the port acknowledged the just huge alphabet soup of ownership, but said, hey, we've got good relationships with all of these different entities and people. Let's bring everybody together to the table. And so I think that's one of the things that the port specifically can be doing in the next 6 years.
And what about Eric in general? What are the differences between your candidacy and Greg's candidacy, including the lake, but other issues?
In general, yes, I would say, the experience, not only at the port over the last 6 years. I've worked offshore. I've worked in freight forwarding, so I have a good understanding of supply chain issues. I mean, we're seeing those pop up in the in the world around us right now, and the Port of Vancouver is definitely positioned to help kind of reduce some of those disruptions. Less so here, but it's a global supply chain. I have long time involvement with the port, initially through the Vancouver Lake Watershed Partnership, a long time investment in the local community with the Fruit Valley Neighborhood Association and the Vancouver Neighborhood Alliance. And in a more nuts and bolts sense, I live on the edge of port property. I live literally 100 yards from the edge of port property and walking distance from Vancouver Lake. I actually a couple of weeks ago, taught my son how to drive a stick down in the parking lot. Over back in the lake. So we're there all the time, and so I have a vested interest in what happens, not just at the port, but in the local community as well.
Greg, what are the differences between your candidacies?
Well, a couple of things. I think it's interesting that he mentioned experience, because my experience is 50 years, all levels in the community. And so, I was going to use that to differentiate me. I've served on numerous boards, and that board experience and the business leadership experience that I have, having run a business and having worked with employees and worked on culture and things, is kind of what I'm saying that I can bring to the commission. And he mentioned something about, the staff being conveners and the commissioners being willing to go along with that. That's exactly the opposite of what my approach will be. I believe that the commissioners need to be the conveners, and that the staff needs to go along with what the commission leads at. And so that is exactly what that's how I differentiate myself from the current commissioners is, well, I don't believe the commissioners should run the port. They're responsible for the port, and they hire a CEO. And so when you have an inexperienced board, which I believe this is primarily, they're either overactive in trying to run it, which they're not, or they tend to be passive, which is, I think, what they've been. And so I would bring a desire to do more leadership and more convening on the commission side, and where the staff is going to do the work, the commission provides leadership. And so I think that's the primary difference between the two of us.
Greg, what role should the port play in addressing climate change?
Well, I think that climate change overrides everything. When you're making business decisions and you're looking at industrial development and things that involve fuel and like their climate change initiatives and things. So it's an integral part, I think, of everything. The word that I use, I was talking to somebody who called this morning and was asking me about things, and she used the word balance. And I have what I think is a balanced approach. The port was in place for economic development and jobs. That's the primary responsibility of the port. But the environment and climate change and caring for the environment goes right along with everything that you do. So I tend not to lead with one. You look at economic proposals, you look at development proposals, and then you weigh the environmental impacts. And if there's something that needs to be mitigated, you look, can that be mitigated? Can it not be mitigated? Do you stop a project or go forward kind of based on that? So I think that it encompasses everything that you do, and it's a normal part of business evaluation when you're doing things. It doesn't like stand alone in my mind. That's not how I approach it anyway.
Now, 5 or 6 years ago, Greg, were you in favor of bringing an oil terminal here, or were you opposed to that?
Good question. I don't think that anybody ever answered my questions regarding the safety adequately, so I could come out and say, I think we should move forward, because I don't think those questions were ever answered well enough. I can tell you that I was disappointed because I did see the economic numbers that were in play. And so our community has lost a huge economic opportunity. And correct me if I'm wrong, but we still have all those oil trains going through our county. And so I've kind of wondered about that a little bit too. It's like, it seemed like there was a lot of concern about oil trains blowing up and, and burning things up or dumping in the river, which is valid when you have oil trains. But I think we still have all those trains. And so I'm a little confused regarding some of that. So I never took a firm position. At the time I was involved at CREDC. And so that particular entity has to be careful. It's a public-private partnership and unable to push, it was a political issue at the time. And so I kind of stayed out of the fray.
So you did not, what about personally? Did you have a personal preference? Did you want it to go in or not?
I would say I was hoping that it would be successful, but that meant they would have mitigated safety concerns. They would have dealt with the issues with the trains. They would have dealt with any concerns regarding the terminal itself, which didn't appear to pose a lot of risk. So I was disappointed that the economic side failed. because I was also aware of what that money could have done for the development in the port for the other areas that they need to develop. So yeah, I was disappointed that it didn't happen.
Okay. Eric, what role should the port play in climate change?
I think it's important that we're doing our part. We can't handle more 115-degree days. And actually right now, if we just wanted to talk dollars and cents right now, we're seeing decreased volumes of grain running through the port because the heat wave just was devastating to grain in Eastern Washington, Idaho, and Oregon. So there's definitely an emergency that needs to be taken care of, and we need to make sure that we're doing our part. If I could respond with to the oil terminal issue, we are currently using that laydown space for wind energy components and creating hundreds more jobs than what was even promised by the terminal at that point. I don't so much see environment and business as something to be balanced, but rather that transition to renewable energy is here. It's happening right now, and there is money and there are jobs to be made by participating in that. And I think if we zoom out just a little bit and think about context, which is something that's important in the port commissioner role, that we can see the opportunity there. And there's tremendous opportunity. We're setting record revenues again, and actually moving forward more quickly than we anticipated on our capital budget this year because of the wind energy components coming through. So there's tremendous opportunity there that I think, frankly, we would have missed out had we pursued the oil terminal further.
And you mentioned the space for the wind turbines, and that's Terminal 5, which had been earmarked for a potential oil terminal. What is the future of Terminal 5?
So the future of Terminal 5 ultimately is going to be some sort of a bulk facility. So whether that's grain, we had some really fantastic interest from a soda ash project. They unfortunately were not able to get things lined up with the railroad the way they needed to, and ultimately the railroad does kind of call the shots on a rail dependent project like that. But whatever the case may be, it's designed for a bulk commodity.
Greg, what would you propose for the future of Terminal 5?
Well, I think it's very important. Right now, the port could use another, what I would call an anchor tenant. You've got United Grain that is, a serious tenant, and they could use an offset so that they have a couple, anchor tenants, as I would call them. And there's a lot of money invested in that. It exists. It's there, and it's not just a laydown space, as Eric called it. I mean, it's more valuable than just a laydown space, as I'm sure you would agree. And so they need to actively find somebody. And I'm aware that there's been some issues with maybe the railroads playing nice together. And one of the railroads has a little more authority in there. BNSF has more authority than UP does because of investment in the past. And so I think it's important to figure out what those differences are with the railroads and do what we can to solve that. And I'm aware of those issues, and I think it's very important that we find the right tenant for that property for the long-term viability financially for the port.
Now, Greg, as Eric mentioned, the port enjoyed record revenue last year. Doesn't that speak to strong leadership from the commission? How do you make the case that leadership has not been strong?
It makes the case for strong leadership by the CEO. If you look at the last 2 years of port commission meetings and read the minutes like I did, you'll notice that you have a very passive group of commissioners. And when you have strong operational leadership, it's easy to do that, especially when you don't have experience in a leadership on a board position. And at least 2 of the commissioners are fairly inexperienced. So I would say that, yeah, there is strong leadership, but it isn't necessarily coming from the commissioners.
Great. Any other questions? Okay, then to the candidates, how about give us your final pitch for why voters should support you, and we'll start with Eric.
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you to the Columbian for the work that you do and keeping the community informed. I think it's really important in terms of making sure that we get the word out. I'll mention a couple of endorsements. I've been endorsed by the Longshore Union, and they have one spot that they can work, and that's at the port. So obviously that means a great deal to me. I've been endorsed by the Firefighters Union, Washington Conservation Voters, Vancouver Mayor Ann McInerney, as well as State Senator Annette Cleveland, and numerous other organizations. One of my favorite, honestly, is a fellow named Pat I talked to a couple of weeks ago at Farmers Market. He has a business here working on muscle cars, and he's pretty frustrated with the negativity in politics at the national level, and really just wants electeds who will show up and listen to people the way I've been doing for the last 6 years. Unlike other business or nonprofit boards, the port commissions are elected positions for a reason, and that's to make sure not just that we're turning a profit, but that the community has a voice in what happens here. Washington depends on its harbors and waterfronts for trade, and that's the purpose of our public ports, is to make sure that it works for the community. When I look back at what was happening at the port 6 years ago versus where we are now, I think it's really clear that we're in a better place on so many fronts, from environmental sustainability to economic development to job creation. And when I'm talking to folks in the community, there's a real sense of excitement about what's going on at the port, and I want to keep on that path as a leader for this community. Like I said, I've lived for a long time now, about 100 yards from port property and walking distance from Vancouver Lake. And so I am uniquely invested in what's happening here. I'm really excited about it.
Great, thank you. And Greg, give us your final pitch, and feel free to mention any endorsements.
Okay. So I have a lot of endorsements, actually. I'm the only candidate that I would say has significant bipartisan support. I've got people on both sides of the aisle who recognize what I've described as a lack of leadership or a lack of activity at the port. I would say the port's a $50 million business. And while commissioners are elected, which is true, they are elected to shepherd a $50 million business. And it's difficult for somebody who does not have business experience or board experience, as I pointed out, to do that. Has nothing to do with lack of intent or desire, but does have to do with the fact that you have to learn how to do some of those things. And I've learned how to do those things over the years. I am equally excited about the what's going on down there. I don't know that I would attribute what's going on down there to the port leadership necessarily. I mean, it's a privately funded project. That's, you know, the heart of that, and then the port has their parts around that, and I think they're doing a great job. And in fact, I'm probably more excited about what's going on down there than I have been about things in a long time. It's going to change the face of Vancouver, and it's very exciting. So I would just say that, from my standpoint, I bring leadership ability, leadership experience, board experience and ability, and a desire to continue the things that they're doing. I was asked today about this lady who called me whether I was wanting to change the direction. She goes, "I'm concerned. Are you wanting to like change everything and move the direction?" I said, "No, I'm not. But I think that the commissioners need to be actively leading, and I don't think that they are."
Great. Well, thank you to both of you. Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both.